Oh my goodness, Blizzcon 2015! Thank you so much for coming out. Welcome to the first ever Blizzard Machinima panel. We've had the opportunity to be a panel, part of other panels in previous years, but this is our very first one all to our lonesome. So thank you once again for showing up. My name is Chris Evans. I am the supervisor of the Machinima department. I've worked at Blizzard for 9 years now. If you know anything about Blizzard, I'm a relative noob, so bear with me. We have lots of cool stuff to show you today. I'm super excited. But first off, I want to introduce our panel to you. Sherman Ohms, lead machinima artist for the WoW project. Robin Comsey, lead machinima artist for Heroes of the Storm. Jordy Swainbank, lighting project lead, machinima department. Jessica Johnson, modeling project lead, machinima department. Hunter Grant, one of the lead animators in the cinematic department. And finally, Taryn Gregory, project director for all the in-game content for World of Warcraft. So, I'm going to turn it over to Taryn, and he's going to talk about some of the early history of the machinima department. Taryn.
Hello, BlizzCon 2015. Can you believe that it's been 10 years since the first Blizzard convention here in Anaheim? Anybody there? 2005? Anyway? Yeah, Mom. I know you were there, Mom. Anyway, in 2005, I was working in Seattle, Washington, and my friend Ezra comes to me and says, dude, Blizzard is having a convention, and they're having a movie contest for machinima. And we were like, whoa, Blizzard is asking us to tell them a story? That's just wild. So Ezra and I got together and we started writing a story that was very personal to us. And that story ended up becoming Return. Return was a story about our own World of Warcraft characters, and we felt it went over pretty well. And when we were selected as one of the winners of the BlizzCon Movie Contest 2005, they invited us to come down here with all of you that were there and share our movie with the convention. We sat there in that hall, not unlike the seats you're sitting in now. Let's go back to that one. And watched as our movie was shared with the Blizzard community. I'd have never imagined at that time that that would become my job, to continue sharing stories in the World of Warcraft with all of you, and it all happened because of BlizzCon. Over the next couple years, in our small video production department, we crafted several trailers that you might be familiar with, including Black Temple, Zulaman, and many others. I'm really looking forward to working with this guy again in Legion. It's going to be awesome. We knew at this time that maybe machinima could be more than just trailers, so we endeavored to create the Wrathgate. How many of you remember the Wrathgate? This was the first in-game cinematic that Blizzard had ever done using machinima techniques. And luckily for our department, it was only the first of many. We've come a long way since the Wrathgate, and we're going to talk today about how we got there and how these people contribute to the process. But I would like to take 1 minute to encourage you. Having seen the journey from fan to employee myself, if you see anything that these artists are doing today and think, wow, I could totally do that, to chase it voraciously. Don't just wait for lightning to strike you. Be the lightning and strike where you want to go.
Taryn, thank you so much. All right, I want to spend some time hanging out in 2010. Now, in 2010, the machinima department at that time was part of the in-game cinematics department. And the in-game cinematics department made all the content for the StarCraft II story mode. Now, right about then, the Diablo team was announcing this new hero they had called a Demon Hunter, and they wanted to do like a hero's announcement trailer. And the Machinima group was tasked with creating this. After Wings of Liberty, we had also upgraded our pipeline in preparation for Heart of the Swarm. So these three things came together, and we made the Demon Hunter hero announcement. Now this was really cool. It was like a transitional point because we developed a lot of the tools, techniques, and workflows that we use in the modern Machinima department. And we're going to talk about all that today. We're going to talk about Machinima artists and how we use them. We're going to talk about modeling. We're going to talk about our own special flavor of rigging. We're going to talk about animation. And finally, we're going to talk about compositing, color correction, and using game engines to render. So once again, I'm going to turn it over to Taryn, and he's going to start us off by talking about the creative process.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So, everyone's going to talk about their disciplines today, and I'm going to talk to you about what it is to be a cinematic director working in-game cinematics. A lot of people see cinematic director, and the only analogy they think is film director. You know, maybe a guy with a baseball cap waving his hands all around like crazy. I'd say that's only about 10% of the job. The rest of the job involves a lot of different disciplines. I work closely with the game team and the creatives to get together and suss out a story that's going to happen somewhere in the gameplay experience or online. I then bring that story or pitch back to our artists, working with storyboard artists to block out the scene, layout artists to get the characters in their poses in the environment, and then subsequently animators, lighters, compositors, effects artists, everyone who brings the final polish to the image, and I have to be there every step of the way. Because it is the director's role to make sure that the truth, the spirit, and the flow of the film is maintained through every discipline, and that they know what you're thinking and what you're aspiring to so they can bring their own talents and create something really special, cinematic magic in the end. I think any director would tell you that they're only one small part of the process, and that without the talented individuals that they've had with them for years, they would have never been able to create the movies that you've come to love. That's 100% true here. Our Machinima team has grown from 2 to the number you see on screen right now, and we are just looking forward to making so much more moving forward. So let's give them all a hand, and we're going to get them up to talk about what they do.
Cool, thank you, Taryn. Hey, Sherman, you want to tell us about the Machinima process?
Sure.
Sherman!
All right, so oftentimes Taryn gives us the story lowdown as quickly as possible. We get the download right away. And sometimes it's just a framework, just a set of ideas, characters, the environment, but it's enough for us to get started on asset creation and collection. Now, I'm a Machinima artist. What does that mean? Well, you sort of sit in two worlds. That of the logical side of technology that makes everything work, and the creative side of art that makes everything look awesome, with some overlap in between. So, in a way, I also have a foot in the game. I'm often enjoying World of Warcraft, of course, but when I'm running around, I'm also observing. I'm looking at everything I can, from a building in the world, an object, even the other equipment all of our players are wearing, because each little thing that I see gets tucked away in my brain, a mental repository of a sort. I'm sure my comrade on the Heroes of the Storm side, Robin, his brain works pretty much the same way. So there are thousands of assets in World of Warcraft, and they span a range of visual styles, from faction and race, all the way to different expansions. Wrath of the Lich King looks entirely different than Mists of Pandaria in visual style. And all of these can be broken apart and stitched back together to create something entirely new and different. Yes, that is a Pepe Mecha Spider Tank, and no, we have not created one. That's just for here. It's okay, it's just between us. So what do we do once we have an idea of what we want to grab? It's sort of like a scavenger hunt. A lot of times I know I'm going on a trip, but I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to end up. So we have a range of internal tools to help us get there. And I'm going to share a few teaser images of something we've been working on, just a few. But we have the development environment to play with from the game team. That lets us work in much the same way that they do, as well as our own internal previewer to let us browse through models and textures very quickly. For a cinematic like this, We could grab the Garrison mailbox and then repurpose the textures to create an entirely new mailbox that fits the aesthetic for our cinematic. It's sort of like a mad scientist project, where in this still, most of this kit was created using textures from the game and objects from the game. The lamppost was ripped straight out of the Goblin kit and dropped into our scene. And one of our modelers helped create the backdrop. This tower as well, Goblin kit. Just a ton of that grungy metal and the rough stone, and the conduit pylons at the very top. Although the orbs at the top were taken from the Thunder King's pedestal. We needed lightning, so we kind of figured, why not go to the source? Doing this lets us match the visual style of World of Warcraft virtually 100%, because we're using work that the tireless efforts from the World of Warcraft team's artists have already made. It already exists, so it fits when we put it together, even if we're making something a little strange and crazy. Being plugged in lets us really push that. And it allows us to work with things like higher resolution textures, so we can push the fidelity of the cinematics and give you all an experience that is truly great. So, once we have things pulled together, we've gathered a bunch of assets, we've built them up. I serve as sort of a gatekeeper. I kickstart the other artists up here and on the rest of our team, and the assets that I grab and I start get touched by all of them. They still need a little spit and polish, which is where they come in.
Sherman, thank you so much. All right, let's hear from Jessica. Jessica, tell us about modeling.
Right on. Hey guys, hey Blizzcon. This is actually my first time getting to talk to you guys as a modeler. And I'm a 3D modeler here on the in-game cinematics team. And a lot of times that means I'm starting off with our game asset characters. So like the game characters that you guys play in game, that's oftentimes where I begin with our cinematic characters. Now, game characters are meant to be seen in the game. You're gonna be spending just as much time looking at your character as you are the really cool environment, like the spells that you're casting, and also the monsters that you're killing. So these characters are kind of made with that sort of optimization in mind. You're also seen on screen with about 100 other players. So keep that in mind when that's what we're starting with. Now, what we like to do is take those characters that are game res and all that, and we like to give them their chance to become a movie star. Now, characters like this really end up on screen like this. And I'm going to show you kind of like a dramatization of what it takes for those characters to go through this process. It's a little bit scary for them, I think. But I usually start off by making the characters a little bit higher res. I like to round out all of their edges and give them a little bit more fidelity so that they can come really close on screen and we can see them all up close and personal. A lot of this takes rounding out all of their muscles, giving their armor a little bit more fidelity, and also spending a lot of time on like their hands and their faces. It's all about making these characters into actual actors on screen and not just characters that you're playing in game. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit later on about topology, but topology is kind of the lines and edges that make up a character's face, all the way from their body, their armor, into their face. And it's really important for these characters not just to look great for their close-up, but also to act and do and create the best performances possible in the hands of our animators. And so my job is to take these characters from their game asset models and make them absolutely ready for their close-up.
Jessica, thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Hunter Grant. Hunter, tell us about animation.
I will try.
Thank you.
Hello, BlizzCon. That's right. All right. So in 2012, I was asked to become the lead animator for the machinima department. And I said, I'm listening. And then I was told, Taryn would like you to do it. And I said, I shall. So as the lead animator, my job essentially is to bring the director's vision to life through the characters, movements, and performances. The first projects I got to be a part of were the War Room Horde, War Room Alliance, the Gunship Explosion, and the Jade Forest during Mists of Pandaria. We had noticed something during these. These were super fun to work on, but man, that panda. See, the game team just gave us the new Pandaren, and we were like, wow, this thing's amazing. It had so much more topology, it was higher res, it could act a lot more, it had more range of motion. Basically, they just implemented a brand new set of technology called skin weighting, and this, along with a lot more bones, allowed for the Pandaren to emote so much more than the other characters. And got us thinking. We had an idea. Wouldn't it be cool if the other characters could match the Pandaren on screen? So we decided to try a test. We thought, man, Garrosh was really fun to animate, and he's kind of starring in our next upcoming piece. Why don't we try a test with Garrosh? Let's try to up-res him. But the goal was to match the fidelity of the Pandaren, but not to break the look of the game. At the same time, we actually made a brand new face rig. And the whole goal was, to, again, to match the abilities of what the game team had already given us with the Pandaren. This gave us Garrosh 1.5. This is the first time we've ever shown him like this. And actually, I was talking to the art director last night. He's never seen this either. But this was the genesis of what WoW Machinima is today. This basically just helped us advance our thinking. Now, at the very same time, unbeknownst to us, the game team just happened to be working on up-resing all of their player characters, and coincidentally, they had started with the orc. We all got word of this and got super excited. We thought, oh my gosh, we have Garrosh. We need Garrosh. Can we please have Garrosh? They happily obliged, thankfully. They sent us the new Garrosh, and we went, wow. Okay, so we ripped out the rig from Garrosh 1.5 and slammed it into Garrosh 2.0. And we thought, wow, this is something special. This became the Siege of Orgrimmar. This was essentially, for us, a new beginning for the Machinima department's animation abilities and capacity. Now, a little bit later, I'm going to kind of go into how we took all this thought process and dialed it to 11, essentially, in Warlords of Draenor. But for now, I'm going to hand it off to Jordy, who makes things pretty.
Jordy.
Thank you, Hunter. Excellent stuff. Thank you, Blizzcon. Wow. Really appreciate that. No pressure, no worries. Show of hands, who knows what lighting and compositing is here? Anybody? Get out. That's a lot of people. I'm surprised. Okay, well, good for you guys. Well, then, full disclosure, and my confession to you is that when I started lighting and compositing, I had no idea what compositing was. No surprise to my bosses and coworkers at the time. Sorry, bless them. I knew what it was as software, and I had used photo editing software before, but I didn't know what compositing as an art form was capable of. And it was pretty easy to take, you know, these guys and turn them into those guys, and that's legitimately compositing, that's fine. But I didn't know what compositing could offer a story being told. I didn't know what compositing could do to solve problems in a production that we might work on. And I didn't know what my artistic capabilities could lend a production process like cinematics machinima. And I think when it comes to either like visual effects or video games, there's so much work that goes into this, the final stage of our pipeline. There's all this visual sweetening, all this attention to detail. We had so much to make this world rich and robust, all the while hoping that you never really notice what we did. Because if you do, you're pulled out of that story we're trying to tell, and that's counterintuitive to our process. And we work on composites sometimes with hundreds of layers apiece, and we might work on 100 shots at once, and it gets really complicated really fast. And that kind of begs the question, where do you start, right? Well, for us, that's the easy part. We start at the beginning. And in this instance, it might be an artist sitting down with a director, in this case, Taryn Gregory, and we hunt for a visual style, a visual target, and an aesthetic that complements the story being told, that kind of like shows the characters in their best light. And you can see that we ended up with this blue number here for Gul'dan, and it kind of makes his green skin pop, and that's pretty cool. Once we hit this target, though, that's when the fun starts. We get to start working on shots, and that's where the fun really begins. We get to take the game capture, and we get to start building layer upon layer of atmosphere and fog and effects and colorize the background and add fires and colorize the characters. It's all this stuff all at once. And in this sequence, you'll see we added a per pixel lighting pass to Gul'dan's cup. And that was a new technology that the game team had implemented, that once we saw it, we were like, dude, we need that. We need to make that cup pop. It talks to what Chris said earlier about sort of that test, that little short. And it really makes this world rich and robust. And I'll admit that lighting and compositing is difficult sometimes. You have to face challenges. You have to solve problems on the fly. But it's the fun part, right? And as we work in World of Warcraft, admittedly, we don't use lighting all that much. We do use lighting quite a bit in Heroes of the Storm.
Jordy, thank you so much. So I want to spend some time. We've looked at the overview of the process, right? So you guys have gotten a general idea of what the artists do and what their disciplines are. Now, we're going to talk about specific projects, how we apply this to specific games. First off, we're going to go to January 2014. There's this game we were working on called Heroes of the Storm. They have a lot of heroes they want to talk about, and they want to talk about them right now. So we needed a very special man for this job, and that was Robin Comsey. Robin, tell us about it.
Hey, thanks, Chris. I think you're special, too. Hello, Blizzcon. My name is Robin Comsey, and I am a lead machinima artist for Heroes of the Storm. And what that means is that it's my job to know the game inside and out so that I can use it to make awesome videos. Now, to date, we've made 25 hero trailers, and there's more on the way. Our most recent was Artanis. And I think what's the most amazing thing about what we do is that 99% of everything you see comes straight from the game. That means everything from the effects to the backgrounds to the character models. All that stuff is what you're going to see when you play the game. And having made so many of these, it's easy to lose track of how far we've come. So let me take you on a little journey way back to the beginning of January 2014. And I guess when I think about it, that really wasn't that long ago. But it was my first day. I was just starting at Blizzard Entertainment as a machinima artist. I was so stoked. I'd never even heard of that job title before. So I wanted to get started. I talked to my bosses and I asked them, hey, what's my first project going to be? And they told me, well, Heroes of the Storm is going to be going into closed beta soon, and they're going to be wanting a trailer for each and every hero in the game. And I was like, wow, that's kind of a lot. Am I going to get any help? And they said, no, it's just going to be you. I was like, okay, well, how do you want me to do this? And a director, not unlike Taryn, came to me and he gave me a storyboard, not unlike this one, and it basically told me that it was going to be my job to transform these images into machinima. Now, nobody in our department really knew exactly what the best way to do that would be, but they knew that there was only one tool for the job, and that tool was the StarCraft II editor, or at least a special flavor of it that was developed for Heroes of the Storm. What's great about this editor is it's actually nearly identical to the one that you have at home if you've purchased a copy of StarCraft II. However, although I had played StarCraft II, I hadn't really fired up the map editor since Brood War back in the 90s. And you know, when I started on my first day and turned on StarCraft II's editor, I could tell that things had kind of changed. We'd entered the third dimension, and there was a lot to learn. So I was sent across the street to sit with the game team and absorb as much information as I could. I also scoured the internet for any help I could find, because honestly, thanks to people like you, I was able to get a little bit of a head start. So really, it was my challenge to figure out what one person could do using this editor. And as it turns out, I could do a lot. I could take ground and sculpt it like clay, just raise it or lower it. I could paint ground textures. I had dozens to choose from. If I wanted, I could plant an entire forest, and it was super simple. Or if I preferred, I could summon a demon army. the game team had made it really simple just to choose from the dozens and dozens of character models in the game and cycle through their combat animations, which gave me the ability to cut from camera 1 to camera 2, and then pan across to the dancing Murloc, and then fade to black. And I think what is just so cool, what's so cool about all this is that I'm really lucky to get to play in this Blizzard toy box. I have all of these awesome models to choose from, and I don't have to make anything from scratch because everything's already been made and it looks beautiful. So I guess the best thing about Machinima to me is the fact that you just take all these awesome things, recombobulate them, and find enough duct tape and bubble gum to turn them into something new. Now, since our humble beginnings a year and a half ago, our team has grown. The Heroes Machinima team has gone from 1 to 4 Machinima artists. And thanks to that, we've had a lot more opportunities to really level up each and every shot. We've added lighting and compositing to our process, which turns every frame into a beautiful picture. And thanks to the folks who blazed the trail with the Demon Hunter trailer and StarCraft II, we're able to import custom models and animations whenever the story really demands it. The first time we really got the chance to do that was for the Eternal Conflict trailer. And I think what's so interesting about this particular trailer is that all the hero characters, all these characters who are front and center, got really tender loving care from the animation guys, Hunters guys, and Jessica and her team got to up-res all their models. But we had a lot of characters we had to fill out the ranks with. I mean, that's a lot of characters. So the great thing about working in this engine is that we can drop in their custom work and our assets that are straight from the game. And if we've done our job right, you can't see the line that divides those two things. They all just meld together. Now, I'm hoping we get the chance to use this a lot more in the future. Most recently, you might have seen it in the announcement for Heroes of the Storm's new game mode, Arenas. Now, check this out. This is what I got from animation. Beautiful animation, focusing on Raynor and Falstad here, but there's nothing in the background. Luckily, the game team created all these awesome spectators, so it was really easy for me to go in and just fill everything out, and it really adds so much. Anyway, thank you guys so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Chris.
Robin, thank you so much. How cool was that? All right, so once again, January of 2014, there was another project on our plate. That was the Warlords of Draenor. So we're going to spend some time really digging in to this project and giving you an overview of what goes on during a WoW expansion in the Machinima department. We're going to start off with Taryn Gregory, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the creative process. Taryn.
All right. Any of you played Warlords of Draenor at any point, ever? Maybe? Awesome. So, we began on this project, as he mentioned, toward the beginning of 2014, and the ask was huge. We had just made the Siege of Orgrimmar trailer, and the game team was ready to double down on the efforts of Machinima and see what more it could bring to an expansion. In fact, we were going to bring more to this expansion than nearly every single in-game cutscene combined from everyone we'd done since we started with the Wrathgate. Whoa, that's going to be a lot of work. Where do we start? As Jordy said, from the beginning. We'd had some success in Mists of Pandaria, where we had done our first split storytelling, where we added individual cutscenes for the Horde and for the Alliance. We wanted to continue this vibe forward, and so when we began at the beginning of the expansion experience, we had zone finales, more like the Wrathgate that ended a story experience than beginning it, for Shadow Moon Valley and for Frostfire Ridge. This was the challenge for us, though, is to make these movies unique, distinct, and sing to the factions that were involved. If you shorten these to a tagline, they're identical. You know, the hero of this faction sacrifices themselves, oops, spoiler alert, to save their people. But how do we make them different? For the Horde side, we had to look into the characters, that while the spirit of the movie was clearly a small force taking on a giant army like so many great movies, what laid beneath the characters' hearts? And it was all in Gunnar. Gunnar, Durotan's brother, who had been jealous of Durotan his entire life for having been given the title of the chieftain of the Warsong, or the Frostwolves. Oh, I'm going to get murdered by some. This had been a splinter in their relationship their entire lives. But it was in this moment, when everything's on the line, when it comes down to when it matters most, Gunnar acknowledges that his brother was the one that needed to live, he needed to carry on and take care of his people, his family. And when Gunnar stood in the valley as the mountain crushed upon him and screamed, Loktar! The Orcish word for victory. He was claiming victory for himself, his family, his people, his clan, and for the Horde. On the other side, in a very, very different vein, a different spirit, we had Yrel and Velen with a battle far away. And everything was quiet and somber, but there was a doomsday device at their feet that was about to go off and eradicate the Draenei people. And Yrel, this character that we absolutely love working with in our cinematics, was in her inexperience at this point, at the beginning of her journey, was overwhelmed with the thought of what was going to happen to her beloved people. But she turned to Velen for guidance, and we saw, if you watch this again, Velen never showed a single moment's hesitation. He was always calm, he was collected, he knew what he had to do, and this, in fact, he wanted this to come because he wanted to right a wrong that he felt had happened years ago, and this was an opportunity for him to be the guide for his people, to pass the torch to Yrel, and at that moment we knew that she was going to have a great destiny. There were many other cutscenes that we endeavored into, including the Shatrath battle with Blackhand, the intros with Khadgar, but there's one more I'd like to talk to about before we pass it on to other artists, and that is the grand finale. Garrosh versus Thrall. This was probably the most challenging creative pre-production movie that I've ever worked on. There was such a complex, rich, emotional backstory between Thrall and Garrosh that where do you even begin? We could put 1 million lines of dialogue in this film to try to hit every single reason that they're upset with each other. I mean, writer's block isn't always not knowing what to say. It's actually having an infinite canvas and being paralyzed at the options that you have. So when I find myself in that situation, you just need to zero in on what you absolutely know. We knew this was going to be a battle to the death with two powerful warriors going to town on each other. So we worked on the action and the acrobatics and the axes flying and okay, we've got that. It's looking good. In those early versions, though, there were observers on the sidelines. People were watching as if they were in the arena and they were wondering what was going to happen next. We elected to take the observers out. So the whole scene was only Thrall and Garrosh. And that opened up a very different vibe. Because much like real people, when you're talking one-on-one in a personal closed space, the way you speak, the way you tell the truth is different than when you're around strangers. So we asked ourselves, if this was the first time Garrosh was ever actually able to talk to Thrall without having to maintain any mask, any air, any fakery, what would really come out of Garrosh's heart at this man? And we realized it was about abandonment. It's always been about abandonment with Garrosh. Abandonment by his father, abandonment when Thrall laid upon him the mantle of the war chief and left him as he walked out in the cataclysm with no guidance and he was not ready. He was not ready to be the war chief. When we wrote these lines and we went to the recording booth, I worked with the ever-talented Patrick Seitz, and we went over the scene time and time again, and when he finally came to deliver this emotional moment, we were all blown away as he began to say these lines.
You left me to pick up your pieces. You failed me.
That was the unprocessed performance. That was what we heard, and our hearts broke. And we knew that we'd finally found a way to paint a picture of Garrosh, that while we could never forgive him for the terrible things he'd done, he was not a character beyond sympathy. You know, we felt we finally struck a complex chord for the death of one of Warcraft's greatest villains.
Taryn, thank you so much. That was amazing. Sherman, you want to talk a little bit about fleshing this world out?
I'll try to follow that up. It's going to be a little tough. But Thrall and Garrosh were just the beginning. This was Warlords of Draenor, and the time of the Orc was at hand! We had 7 warlords to deal with, just to start. But we also had just as many protagonists. We had Draenei, We had Thrall. We had Khadgar. We were going to see a new Khadgar. We were super excited. But the orc was still our top priority. Take a look at Frostfire Ridge. Almost every character you see is an orc. Duratan, Gunnar, and the Iron Horde they're facing. Even though Duratan is a warlord, he shares a similar face and body structure with all of the other orcs on screen. So, fortunately, the game team had worked on the orc and the dwarf first as a player character to up-res. And we took that geometry and we added our own rig into it. We also needed extras, like in film. So we worked out a technology called componenting that lets us quickly switch the appearance of our rigs so that Gunnar and Drekthar, the Iron Horde, are all essentially the same rig. And an animator can quickly block out tons of orcs doing animations. On the flip side, we also had Yril, another character we were super excited to work on. A character that we knew we were going to develop, not just in story, but also as a character herself. When we saw her concept at BlizzCon 2013, we were enamored with it. We really wanted to push her look and make her stand out as a heroine that the player could understand. We did this by focusing on her horns and her hair as her unique identifier and a customized gear progression that we would use different sets whenever she was in a different cinematic to show her journey. For the Shadowmoon Valley cinematic, we actually found a set from Burning Crusade that was a mix of cloth and plate to show that she was still learning, still developing. It was actually the Aldor Regalia, a mage set from Burning Crusade. We did a little color shifting so it didn't clash as much with their skin, changing the blue to a violet and toning down the metal. For the Talador finale, we went to a straight paladin set. We kept the same purple that we had used in order to keep the same scheme. At about the same time, Garrisons was a new feature that was going to be in Warlords of Draenor, and the game team came to us with a request. They wanted to give players a reward every time the garrison would level up. Something flashy, but not too long. Something that wouldn't pull you out of the game, but still give that nice little ego boost. So we went back to our old school machinima roots. We went and worked with whatever we could find in the game as it was being developed. And we combined it with our own custom camera system to get smooth curves and sweeping vistas. It's a technique that we would later revisit in the Hellfire Citadel patch for 6.2, whenever a player would receive the shipyard. The main character had changed to Khadgar for both cinematics, but we kept the same uniqueness for both the Horde and the Alliance.
Sherman, thank you so much. Let's hand it over to Jessica.
So, I remember the first time I saw Yril. I'm pretty sure some of you were at BlizzCon 2013, right? And she flashed on screen for maybe just a second, and I was in love. So, I don't even play Alliance. I'm a little bit of a Horde fan. But I was like, oh my gosh, I would roll Draenei for her. I was sold, right? And then Taryn comes to me while I'm working on StarCraft, and he's like, I want to do a story about Yril. And I was like, oh wait, what? No, pick me. I just couldn't even believe it. We very seldom get to have characters like these, where we take them just from a starting player all the way up into a class hero, like a hero for her entire race. Oh man, I was just so excited. And the way we started, at least on my end, was with a game model. And actually, thanks to Sherman and his hard work, he found all of the armor sets that we would use to really show her progression without actually having to say, oh, by the way, she's a badass now. But my job was really simple. I got to look at that concept, and my art direction was make that concept. So the starting point was really her horns. Like, it makes her an iconic and kind of crowned character. My first task was like, I made the horns exactly like the concept, where you see her facing you straight ahead. And those were really cool, so long as you were facing straight ahead. The moment she turned her head, they got in the way and they didn't look right, and you're like, wow, that really kind of like breaks what like epic character she is. So we did some adjustments specifically for camera angles, which is unique, at least for the cinematics team. My next job was actually to up-res a lot of her armor. Now, game models, the texture is kind of molded over the game character body, which is great for the game, but for the cinematics, we kind of wanted to give her some like real gravity and make her seem like a force to be reckoned with. I mean, she's wearing plate mail. Let's make it look like plate mail. I actually spent a great deal of time working on her chest piece so that she was wearing a breastplate and not just a texture. Now, my job is really kind of interesting because I'm modeling at the same time as texturing, and I'm really using the textures that the game provides me to tell me what I'm going to be doing for that model. And a lot of the times I will take the highlights and I'll put an edge loop right along the highlight and pull that out, and then find the shadow areas and put an edge loop on the shadow and push that in, and actually ends up giving her a really unique and almost heroic silhouette. And just like the concept, it made her look like a force to be reckoned with. Now, we repeated this sort of process for actually all of her armor sets, along with my favorite armor set, which is her Exarch. This is her final form. She like looks amazing. And specifically Taryn wanted, he's like, you know how female armor sets are? Like, let's give her a real chest plate. Like, let's make it look like she can take a blow from Black Hand and stand back up and just kick his butt. But not just, like, my work isn't just about up-resing the armor and making the characters look really unique and wonderful on camera, but it's also about supporting teams like Hunters as animators so they can give and deliver really meaningful performances. When you saw Urel actually working through all of her, she's gonna lose her mentor in Velen's Sacrifice. And in that cinematic, they had very few lines to deliver, so the character actually had to deliver a really emotional performance, but with only saying a few things. And Hunter and I worked together specifically on this character as the beginning, but carried on all of that work on the topology of her face over into other characters. We turned our game models into actual movie stars that could deliver really meaningful performances. And in the end, Urel was such an exciting character to work and learn on, and a beautiful character to have come to life. And in the end, she really ended up stealing the show.
Oh my goodness, that was awesome. Thank you. All right, let's turn it over to Hunter. Hunter, tell us all about it.
Well, I could talk about how we actually animate stuff, where we create a pose and we tell the computer to take a photo. We do it again and we tell the computer to take another photo. We rinse and repeat 30 times every second, which gets you this. Or I can talk about the thought process involved and how we brought out the characters' personalities through the performances. I'm going to go option B. Now, you heard a lot about Velen's Sacrifice and Urel, and there's a reason for that, because in Velen's Sacrifice was a really unique challenge to all of us, and it's actually one of my personal favorites. You see, there's a single piece of spoken dialogue in the entire piece. The rest is quiet and subtle. Essentially, what most of our cinematics are not. I mean, we do epic really well. We do epic on top of epic, wrapped in a turducken of epic. But this was Urel's story. This was the beginning of her journey. So the question is how do we make something compelling with next to no dialogue in 1 minute and 25 seconds? Well, we do it by starting with showing vulnerability. Not weakness, mind you, but vulnerability. You see, in the beginning, like Taryn was saying, she looks to Velen for answers. And it isn't until what she doesn't understand is that the answers are within her. And it isn't until Velen transfers the mark of the Naru to her, essentially passing the torch, like Taryn had said, that the calm washes over her and you start to see the potential behind her. You start to, in the final shot, you realize that there's this hope and determination behind her eyes, a kind of foreshadowing of what's to come in the battle for Shatrath, where she truly becomes into her own and she becomes powerful and confident. Now, on the opposite end of things, we have Garrosh versus Thrall. If villain is quiet and subtle, Garrosh versus Thrall is loud and visceral. What we do best. It's epic. Now, there's a shared theme between the two, which is they're both very intimate moments. In Garrosh versus Thrall, it's a very pivotal moment for Garrosh, one, us as a department, and for me personally. I mean, Garrosh helped advance our thinking of what was possible in machinima. He's the orc from which all of our other orcs came from. I mean, every single time you see an orc walk into the scene, it's the walk of Garrosh walking away from the explosion in the Siege of Orgrimmar. All of it, like his animations, his poses, have been shared across orcs and humans and Draenei alike. And now we're about to kill him. I mean, come on, how do you replace Garrosh? He's chaos personified. Like, we had to start over. How do you learn to love again? Well, we get Gul'dan. I mean, if Garrosh is the wrecking ball, Gul'dan is essentially that fatal, infectious disease that you can never get rid of. We first started with Gul'dan, actually, by creating some of the game cycles that you see within Warlords of Draenor. We started to learn about his personality a little bit. We learned that he was plotting and scheming. We learned that he was fueled by power and control. I mean, come on, that's awesome. I mean, he was the villain we had been waiting for. How do you follow up? Garrosh? This is the worthy successor. This is the guy that's going to wreak havoc amongst everything. And I cannot wait for you all to see what we have in store for him in Legion.
Hunter, thank you so much. All right, speaking of turduckens of epic, let's hear from Jordy about how he finishes these things off.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Hunter. Like the Wilhelm scream of walk cycles as the orc walking around. It's awesome. Let me move forward here and say thank you very much. Warlords of Draenor was a ton of work. There was so much to do on this. When Kim and Taryn came up to me, I had no idea how much work was involved. It was 6 sequences. It was 274 shots. And I'm just like, what does that even look like? I have no idea. It looks like that. All at once. This was due in 6 months. They were a quarter of the way through that time. Nothing was really finished, and I didn't even know where to begin. It was double the amount of work that they'd done before. It was kind of a Herculean amount of work. And I didn't really think it was going to take the addition of a couple other employees to get it done. It was going to take kind of real change from the beginning. And so that's what we set out to do. We developed a comp template where an artist can kind of sit down and just go bang, 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 and hammer out some stuff really quick that made things really functional really fast. I sat with Chris and Taryn for a little bit, and pretty soon we increased throughput, and these sequences were kind of moving along. And that allowed us to kind of take a breath and reevaluate where the artistic direction for these sequences were headed. And then we kind of got into some more fun stuff. Here you can see that initial comp template. It's a black hand shot. It's in the Shatrath thing that Hunter was just talking about. It's pretty basic. There's a layer of black hand, the background, the foreground, the sky. That's where we start. That's where we end up. There's like 30 explosions there, a minimum. There's probably 10 lens flares. There's a whole lot more art happening. It's a lot more rich. It's a lot more red. It's a lot more aggressive. And that was just one shot out of, 50, 60 in that sequence. It was incredible. Another shot featuring our favorite heroine, Yrel. She's about to drop the bass on Blackhand here, right? And you might notice something. Her wings are out of control. That Avenging Wrath spell that looks slightly different in the game, we made that thing sing. We paid that thing some attention. We gave it some love. We wanted you to know. We wanted you to pay attention to her being a badass. We wanted you to know this is one of her moments. And I don't think you can really pass that up when you see this. And as we move forward through all these sequences, kind of take a step back again and watch them develop over that 6 months, it was really amazing. Everything started coming together towards the end, and all we had left to work on were these great Lords of War series. And if you don't remember, it was a 2.5D series, art directed by the amazing people over there, like directed by Doug Gregory. No relation to Taryn, although if your last name is Gregory, you got a really good shot at being a director at Blizzard, I think. And they had this really gritty, dark, brooding, evil style. And we kind of had to think about how we did things to elevate our artistic style to kind of mirror theirs. So we got to use a 3D package for the first time. We had real lights, we had real shadows, and we got to create these really intense, brooding sessions between Murad and Varian as they discussed things over this war table. It was a really, really great experience. And that kind of circles back to what's great about Machinima. We're always telling these really great stories, and we always kind of adhere to the aesthetic of the game that we're involved in. These characters are WoW assets, right? But they look a little different. It's that special attention to a unique detail that we love playing a part of. It's super fun. It's a super great time. And I hope you know a little more about lighting and compositing than I did when I started working. Thank you guys very much.
Jordy, thank you so much. Well, that was amazing. So, thanks for lending us your ears. Is there anything else?
Just one more thing, Chris.
Awesome.
So, we're just about wrapping up now, but before you go anywhere, we do have something special in store for you. But before that, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here with your valuable BlizzCon time as we share our stories, for coming to BlizzCon itself. It's so important to us, guys, when you come and be a part of our Blizzard family here. We really appreciate it. It's your passion, it's your love of the worlds that gives us the power to come in every day and continue to share these stories with you. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause for showing up. Our crew is going to be over here afterwards. If you want to approach us, have any questions, talk shop about lighting, animation, whatever, we're totally cool. We won't bite, I swear. But before that, I have one question for you. How would you like to see just a small storyboard teaser at what we're all working on for Legion? Thank you.
Thank you for attending the cutscene behind Blizzard's